Paul Cezanne. Cezanne was also a outdoor or in plein air painter from France. He worked with the Impressionists at the beginning of his career and then broke off to pursue his own style. Cezanne focused on arrangements of constructed forms or geometric forms. So what does that mean? He believed that there was hidden order in nature, and you could break it into basically the simplest or stylized version, being a geometric form. Whether it's his mountains or fruit or people, you can see the abstraction in the forms. So his paintings were abstract, however, they weren't so abstracted that you could not recognize them. Cezanne's revolutionary theories and work really led to the influence of Cubism, which you'll be looking at tomorrow. So I want you to look at and notice the geometric forms in his brushstrokes as they emerge in his paintings. So you're welcome to please go to Khan Academy and read this essay. There's also a decent video about this one. So Cezanne adopted kind of a brighter palette. It wasn't necessarily as muted as the realist or some of the French painters before him. They were bright, but it wasn't arbitrary. But he did abandon the impasto or the really heavy brush strokes, even though it's still unblended color and you can see the brush strokes. It's not a really thick application of paint. So this work in particular, the one included in the 250, he painted this mountain several times throughout his career. In his work, the one that now resides in the Philadelphia Art Museum, Cezanne divides his composition into 3 equal horizontal sections, which extend across the 3-foot wide canvas. Our viewpoint is elevated, so it's like we are across from it in the far distance looking, not necessarily from the bottom looking up. Closest to us lies a band of foliage and houses. Can you tell that those are supposed to be, homes right here? And then kind of the brush and the trees. Next, rough patches of yellow ochre, emerald, and green suggest the patchwork of an expansive plain. So all of this area could be fields, farmland, forest, whatever lies between civilization and this far off mountain. And then we have this craggy or jutted mountain in the far background. The blue seen in this section also accentuates the rest of the work. It's really harmonious with the yellows and the greens. And it really helps this piece come to life visually. So this is actually a photograph of the vantage point where Cezanne would stand and paint this mountain, which again, he was really familiar with. He lived right where the viewpoint of the vantage point. So he could wake up every morning and see this mountain. It was documented that he actually climbed this several times throughout his life. And so you can see the actual landscape as opposed to his perceived interpretation. Kind of beautiful. So why is this Cezanne work the one that's chosen for our 250? I actually asked myself that question too. When I learned about Cezanne, it was more about his landscapes. More about his still lifes than his landscapes. But you can see the way that he's progressed through his style with the painting of this exact mountain. So I think that that's why College Central has included this work in particular, because it shows truly his style. So this is a series. He would return to Mount Saint Victoire throughout his career, and you can see it's documented, and I'll show you later in this presentation. So to our left, same mountain, kind of a little different vantage point, but abstracted in a little bit softer of a way. A little bit blurry, but you can still make out the home. We're from a lower vantage point, much closer to the mountain. We've got all of our trees and brush and landscape, but still abstracted. I like this one. I like the color schemes and kind of the soft brush work. This reminds me maybe of like early fall. Yet again. Okay, so you can take your time recording this, but just in summary, this truly isn't an impression landscape or impressionist, because he's not sitting there painting it quickly. Even though he does paint in a series throughout his career, the way that we could compare to Monet painting series of the same thing throughout his career, it's not about capturing that moment in time, about what's happening with the light. It's more about what's happening with the form and not the color and the light. Like I mentioned, he really greatly influenced Cubism and abstraction. This is an example of one of his still lifes. He was known to work on a still life for so long that the fruit or the flowers or the food that he was painting would actually become rotten and start to deteriorate before he was actually finished with the imagery. And so again, not an impression. He's not painting quickly. All of this is pre-planned and sketched, and it's about all of these forms. So if you can break these different planes into forms, we have the groupings of the apples, and then within the apples we actually have the spheres. Okay guys, so to summarize post-impressionism, I've mentioned the idea of an umbrella through the last several videos. So if you can picture that, post-impressionists are extending what impressionism was while rejecting the limitations of impressionism. They continue to use the vivid bright colors. They often use thick application of paint and real life subject matter. But the difference was they were starting to emphasize more geometric forms. They're distorting forms and shape for a very expressive effect, and they're using unnatural or arbitrary color.